All right. So what causes dermatographia? So it's going to be different in everyone. I mean, so like, it's kind of like asking, how did somebody reach New York City, basically, right? There's like a million different ways to get to New York City. And there's a million different life paths that will get you to New York City, let alone, different actual physical routes to New York City. It's not the perfect metaphor. I mean, there's a lot of overlap as well, but still, they're, probably, what some people would call autoimmunity. But I think a lot of it is probably related to light. So our light environment is way more important than people think. So if you have a skin disorder, I think your first thought should be light environment. Okay. um, your skin senses light. It has non-visual photoreceptors in it. Okay. I mean, everyone knows that it has photoreceptors for UVB, but it's actually sensing all forms of light. And so you can look at Jack Cruz's work if you can understand anything he's saying. But it's super important for any kind of skin disorder to get in the natural sun and get out of unnatural light. And the most important things for light are that you get it throughout the day, and it's more important to get it in the early mornings. So that will help to synchronize your circadian rhythms, which will synchronize all of your hormones. So just something that I wanted to talk about, and just as an illustration of how something seemingly simple that we've been doing for over 100 years, which is staying up after sunset with the lights on, much later than we would have been able to if we didn't have any artificial lighting, how that could affect somebody's health. And it's from my latest blog post on the Sherpas and the billionaires not getting jet lag. So basically the setup is, I mean, I'm just trying to find where I wrote it, but the basic setup is that in the daytime, when you go out and you see the sun and you're exposed to the blue light and all the different wavelengths, it stimulates dopamine, serotonin. It stimulates the production of all these hormones that are daytime hormones that are supposed to be high in the morning, and including cortisol, right? So all these things are supposed to be high in the morning and then low at night. And then there's other things that are supposed to be high at night and low during the day. But all your hormones, all of them follow these diurnal rhythms. And if your circadian rhythms are not solid, then none of your hormones will be solid, and there will be knock-on effects, right? Like of each one causing other problems with other ones, causing other problems with like 100 other ones. And it's like a ripple effect. It just ripples out, like a butterfly effect, you could call it. So one simple illustration of this is, okay, let's say that you get sunlight during the day, but you also leave the lights on at night. Okay. And so you have the lights on for, say, 2, 3, 4 hours after dark. Melatonin levels don't start rising until 4 hours after first dark. Okay, so once it goes dark where you are, levels will, start to shoot up like 4 hours later, or at least get to significant levels 4 hours later. So a lot of people are just never achieving the levels of melatonin their body expects during the night. Okay, so maybe you have half as much melatonin produced in a night as you should. Now, the key here is that melatonin is made from serotonin, right? So I said serotonin is made during the day, and then melatonin is made from the serotonin at night. So now you have this chunk of serotonin during the day that was made, right? Because you're exposed to blue light, whether you go in the sun or not, you're making some serotonin, because there's blue light inside as well. And then you're not using up all the serotonin to make melatonin. So now you have extra serotonin, right? So it's almost like being on an SSRI. It's like, blue light at night is like a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It's like you're chronically taking an SSRI. Everyone in, all of, all of the Western world has been taking the equivalent of an SSRI for the last 100 years since we've had electrical lighting and people have been just addicted to it. And so what are the side effects of taking or of having higher levels of serotonin? So basically, you would have, acute symptoms could be some restlessness, agitation, confusion, hallucinations, tachycardia, arrhythmias, high blood pressure, tremors, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. So you're not usually going to get the acute symptoms, but you could have toned down versions of some of these, right? And then chronically elevated serotonin levels will lead to increased cortisol production. Okay, so the cortisol is a stress hormone, which can make you fat and lead to insulin resistance, et cetera, et cetera. Prolactin excess altered levels of thyroid hormone, growth hormone, sex hormones, oxytocin, which is kind of like, you can think of it as a hormone that makes people feel close to each other, love hormone maybe, and insulin levels, right? And then, so all of those things are themselves going to affect like 10 other things, right? And each of those 10 things is going to affect 10 other things, right? So you can see this ripple effect. So let's just trace out the first thing, right? I said chronically elevated serotonin leads to chronically elevated cortisol. So what does that cause? Chronically elevated cortisol causes, like I said, weight gain, insulin resistance, possibly diabetes and leptin resistance later, hypertension, heart disease, low immune function, muscle weakness, osteoporosis, mood disorders, cognitive impairment, reproductive hormone imbalances, skin and hair problems, and digestive upset. And does that itself by affecting levels of insulin, thyroid, sex hormones, growth hormone, prolactin, adrenaline, leptin, and ghrelin. So there's a lot of overlap between these, right? So serotonin affected things that, and then so it affected cortisol in like 5 other things, and then the cortisol also affected some of the things the serotonin affected and made them even worse. So you can see very quickly how a lot of the diseases of the modern world could be linked to simply leaving the lights on after dark, okay, and having too much serotonin that leads to all these knock-on effects, right? These domino effects on all the other hormones. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg, okay? That's just like one little thread that I followed for you. Really, the way we should think about it is you're consuming too much light. You're consuming more light than you're designed to consume. And you are, so say you live up north in New York and the summers are naturally very long days. There's a lot of light, and the winters are very short days. The summers in that situation are meant to prepare a mammal, like a human being, for the winter when there's not usually in the natural environment, not going to be a lot of food available. And there's going to be long nights and they're just going to sleep a lot, right? And they're not going to do much during the day because there's not going to be a lot of, you're going to sow, during the summer, and you're going to reap in the fall, and then you're just going to go through the winter with what you did in the summer. So your body during the summer, during the long days, it actually stimulates cortisol and insulin and all these other things because you're getting more blue light during the day, during these longer days, and you pack on a couple of pounds, and then you can make it through the winter easier. You kind of hibernate through the winter. Basically, you would naturally, if you were getting all the natural signals in the environment and no unnatural signals, you would sleep longer in the winter naturally. You would just sleep all night. And then in the summer, the nights would be shorter and you would feel refreshed sleeping less in the summertime, and you would be awake and alert all during the day. But in the modern context, winter never comes. Okay, it's an endless summer because our nights are also half day because the lights are on. And so this is like, it's the same thing as overeating refined carbohydrates. You're overeating sunlight. You're over consuming light, right? And what is that doing? So if you overeat, let's just say you overeat carbs, right? The kind of like the mainstream paradigm is you overeat too many carbs, but it's definitely more complicated than this. But let's just simplify it, right? You overeat sugar. You're just eating sugar all the time. You burn out your pancreas, and you develop diabetes, right? I think that's way oversimplified. I think there's a lot of other stuff involved too, like light and seed oils and stuff. But let's just keep it simple, right? You could say the same thing about like over exercising and you just like, exhaust yourself. You're basically exhausting all the hormonal systems and the organs that raise those hormones, the daytime hormones, by getting too much day for your whole life. Okay. It's extremely stressful. Your thyroid is stressed. Your adrenals are stressed. Everything is stressed because they're being asked to make too much and never have a break. The winter never comes for them, right? The night never comes for them, let alone the winter. Every day, they're expecting nighttime to come and give them a break where they can shut off. And so the cortisol is raised longer than it's supposed to be raised because you leave the lights on after sunset. Your thyroid is high for longer than it's supposed to be. And so it's getting less of a break, right? So just like it should make sense, right? It's if you like ran a marathon every day, eventually you would just collapse and die, right? Like supposedly the first person who ran a marathon did. So no wonder you're developing, hypothyroidism or adrenal fatigue or whatever you want to call it, and all kinds of other problems. Anyway, hopefully that makes sense.